I want to welcome you all to forming new and better habits. This is a question I get asked a lot about. Hey, I see some applause going up there by Zaraki. I get questions a lot about this. How do we break the patterns? How do we form new habits that are going to be more positive, help us be more productive, help guide us toward being more the person that we want to be rather than the person that we feel we already might be. And there are some really wonderful tips that I can cover in, about an hour, maybe a little bit less to leave time for questions. So let's dive right into that. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to start a new habit right now. I want to break a pattern here. So let's get physical for a second. Okay, wherever you are in your space, go ahead and stand up if you can, okay, in your space. I know this is going to seem weird. All right, I see some people, I see some avatars rising up. I just rose up, so you can tell I'm standing. Be aware of the space around you. Now, obviously, this works best if you are in virtual reality, but also even if you're in 2D on your computer. Go ahead and stand up, back away from your computer screen. Make sure you got room around you, and be aware of the space around you. And I just want you to move around. Get those arms moving. Get those legs moving a little bit. Just let's get a little bit of energy going. Let's get a little bit of yeah, there we go. Get some movement in there. I just hit the back of my chair, but that's okay. No worries. All right. Go ahead and just kind of get those legs moving as well, moving side to side. Let's go ahead and move the head, move our heads around a little bit. Just kind of, yeah, get that neck crack. Boy, I don't know if you could hear that neck crack over the microphone. Woo, yeah, that feels good. All right. All right, you can go ahead and sit back down if you were seated. You can stay standing if you prefer standing, which is not a bad thing either. And I want to welcome Baby Vet. Hello, Baby Vet. Welcome. It's good to have you here. We're diving right in now. Remember that we are very much a product of our experiences and of the patterns that we have formed throughout our lives. Partially, that's just the way the brain works. The brain is a series of neural pathways. Those neural pathways get deeper and deeper and more rooted in our brains as those patterns represent themselves in our brains. But then there's also a lot of just kind of, for lack of a better term, addictive tendencies that we have as human beings as well that cause these patterns to be ingrained in us on a deeply psychological level as well as a physiological level. But we have more control over this than we think. Now, just as a reminder, you can see there, join the Facebook group if you would like to stay in touch about these programs that we're doing every week and be among the first to hear about them. Join the Facebook group once we're done here. If you just go to Facebook groups and you search on Take Charge Alt Space, you should find the logo from today's program on there. It's the same logo, so you'll recognize it right away. Just join that group. I'm not posting on it a lot. You're not going to get deluged with stuff. But I am periodically posting even some questions that might impact what we do going forward and so forth. All right. Now, the first thing to keep in mind when it comes to forming habits is that the responsibility to change habits resides purely within you, in each one of us as individuals. And this is actually a really good thing in the long run. This is a good thing because the good thing about this is we don't have to worry about anyone else doing this for us. We don't have to worry about the environment around us changing this for us, or the people in our lives changing this for us, or our circumstances to change this for us. We have the ability to change these habits for ourselves each and every moment of every day. And I like to look at that as a good thing, not a negative thing. But I think the first thing we need to do is kind of talk about, hello, Tommy, welcome. Good to see you here. The definition of a habit, so that we're all coming from the same space. I think everyone probably kind of knows this, but the definition I've heard that I like the most is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. That's the definition of a habit. Now, that last part is a really interesting part, usually one that is difficult to give up. That's part of what we're going to be talking about today. It's not just about forming new habits, but it's about discarding and letting go of negative habits. And we all have them. We all have them. I'm still dealing with bad habits that I have every single day. And the more we can be aware of those habits and be aware of our ability to change them, the better off we're going to be. So let's dive right into some key points here, okay? Key point number 1 about forming new habits or destroying bad ones is determine clearly why you want or must form or change this habit. Determine the why. Now, this is one of the things that we don't do nearly enough, and it's one of the reasons I believe wholeheartedly that people don't achieve more of their goals and change more of their habits or form new ones, is we don't clearly outline why we want or must change this habit. Now, one of the things I thought of yesterday, and I didn't add this to any of the slides that are behind me, but I thought of this as I was driving yesterday because over the last week or so, I've been preparing for today's session, making sure that I'm giving you the best information possible. And as I was driving around yesterday, as is prone to do, my mind starts wandering on the subject. And I thought of how important it is to remember 2 different key areas of our existence when we're thinking about habits: the micro and the macro. The micro and the macro. Now, what I mean by that is oftentimes when we're thinking about whether we should form a new habit or change an existing habit, we're oftentimes focused a little bit more on the macro, the micro, the small frame of time around that habit versus the macro, the large amount of time around that habit. Now, for an example, let's say the habit I'm trying to change is I'm trying to eat better. I'm trying to eat less junk food, or what some people might call comfort food, okay? I like myself some good chocolate. I like some salty food, some potato chips and French fries and stuff like that. Well, maybe I'm realizing that is probably not healthy for me in the long run, so I'm trying to change that. Well, when you sit down and you start thinking about changing it, what we tend to do as humans is we tend to focus on what's going to change immediately. Well, the thing that's going to change immediately on the micro scale, right, is that I'm not going to be able to eat the stuff I like. That's what's changing right away, right? But what we're not thinking about as much is what am I going to gain from that change in the macro time frame, the large scale, the longer time frame. What am I going to gain from that over the course of time? Now, it's much easier for us generally welcome everyone. Hello, Amorda and Anonymous. I like that. Hello, Chill Mango. Welcome. You haven't missed much yet. We're still on key point number 1. What we're talking about today is forming new habits and changing old habits. Okay, so you got here just in time. Good stuff. What we're talking about now is the micro and the macro. So in that example of cutting out the foods I shouldn't be eating, I'm focused on what's going to happen right now. Why? Because it's the most immediate. It's the thing that's going to change my state, my activities, my internal representations right now, which is I have to stop doing something I love. If any of you happen to be smokers, I've never been a smoker, but I can totally understand this, yep, I see a hand going up there, that talking about quitting smoking, right? The first thing that we tend to think about is, well, I don't get to have this cigarette. So we have to stay focused on the why, and we really need to focus on the macro, the long term. Really focus on that. So what I like to do is before I put that French fry in my mouth, or before I go to get them, that's the better thing, before I go out to buy those French fries, or before I go out to buy those chips or that chocolate that I really want right now, I immediately think, what is this going to do to my body 6 months from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? What is the impact of not only this French fry or these potato chips, but the fact that if I do that now, I'm probably going to let myself do it tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day, and it's all going to compound on each other. And how many French fries am I going to have? How many bad fats and terrible preservatives and all this stuff am I going to have running through my body in 10 years? From doing this? Now, when I start thinking about the macro, the micro doesn't seem nearly as important either. This one small fry from McDonald's, this one piece of chocolate from Godiva doesn't seem to matter quite nearly as much as it did before I started thinking about the macro, the large scale. Does that make sense to everyone? If it does, show me some emojis. I saw some emojis going up from Zaraki there. If that makes sense, show me some emojis. That micro versus macro was something I see a lot of emojis going up. That's great. That micro versus macro was something I thought about again last night while I was driving, or yesterday while I was driving down around, and I didn't get a chance to add it to my slides, but I'm glad I remembered to mention it. So now, once you think of the long-term ramifications of changing or not changing this habit, write it down. Do yourself a favor and write down what you just thought of, and write it down right now. Write it down in a place that you will have access to it as you go forward. What I like to do is I'll keep notes on my smartphone, or better yet, I'll do it in Google Docs. If you're familiar with Google Documents, you have access to them anywhere that you have your computer, your laptop, your iPad, your mobile device, whatever it is. As long as you've got an internet access or a cellular signal, you can access your Google Documents. So I will start a Google document that is my habits document. And when I think of reasons why I should change a habit, form a new habit, stop a habit, I will write that down immediately, and I have access to it everywhere I go throughout my day. That's important, because guess what? In the smoking example, right? If you're a smoker, this particular temptation to have that cigarette is not the only time that's going to happen, is it? Certainly not. It's going to happen an hour from now. It's going to happen 2 hours from now. It's going to happen a day, a week, a month, right? So the more you have access to the why that you've written down of why you need to change this habit in the macro time frame as well as the micro time frame, then you can reread that to yourself before you light up that cigarette, or in my case, before I eat that French fry. All right, so write it down. Here's another really important principle of human psychology, the pain versus pleasure principle. Now, I've talked about this a little bit before on previous weekly events that we've had in here. How many of you have heard me talk a little bit, show me some emojis, about the pain versus pleasure principle? I want to see some emojis here. All right. Baby vet, Tommy. All right, good. Yep. The pain versus pleasure principle is the most basic, as far as I'm concerned, okay, and all the study that I've done over 30 plus years, it's the most basic principle of human nature that I have ever seen. That at its most basic, when you boil down every decision that we make in our lives, it comes down to one of two reasons we're making that decision or we're taking that action. Either to avoid pain or to gain pleasure. That's it. Every decision we make on a moment-to-moment basis over the course of our entire lives is to serve one of those two things, and that's it. Now, even I've had people that have said, yeah, but Todd, what about like when you're donating to charity or something? You know, that's not a selfish thing. It doesn't have, well, is it? I mean, yes, you're doing something selfless by donating to that charity or by doing something nice for this particular cause. But you're also probably doing it because it makes you feel good because you're doing it, right? It makes you feel good to be giving back. It makes you feel good to be doing something good for others. I've heard this said before, that there's no such thing as a selfless act, as a purely selfless act. Now, I think that could be open to debate a little bit, but I subscribe to that a bit, that we derive pleasure from that giving as well. And that's not a bad thing, because it allows us to remember that every decision we make is to avoid pain or gain pleasure. You've got to determine this habit that you are trying to form, or this habit that you're trying to quit or change. Is the reason you are doing that habit to avoid pain or gain pleasure? All right. In the smoking example, it's to gain pleasure, right? Sometimes it could be to avoid pain as well, right? Anyone that has an addiction of any kind will say that part of the reason that I have this addiction is because it helps me to put things out of my mind that I'm trying to get away from. It helps to soothe me. It helps me to feel better. It helps me to calm down, whatever it is. So there's, in some instances, the reasons we're doing things are both to avoid pain and to gain pleasure. So now all we have to do, at its most basic, if you get nothing else from today but this one point I'm about to give you here, you have the potential to change every habit you have going forward. If we know that pain and pleasure are the main things, then what we have to determine is, does the pain that I will get from not changing or forming this new habit in the long run, will that pain outweigh the pleasure I get right now by continuing this habit or by not forming this new habit? That's all it boils down to, is how we associate where we're getting the pain, where we're getting the pleasure. Because guess what? Of those two principles, pain versus pleasure, which one do you think tends to drive people more? So I'm going to ask this, and I want you to show me with emojis. Don't give me any emojis yet. I'm going to ask you if you feel pain is the more powerful motivator or pleasure is the more powerful motivator as a general rule. Okay, so who thinks pleasure is the more driving motivator? Show me some emojis. Or put your hand up. There we go. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. How many of you think that pain is the greater motivator as a general rule? Okay. All right. So more people feel that it's pain. Well, guess what? It typically is. Pain tends to be the more driving force in our lives. Avoiding pain. Let's put it that way. For example, if I were to come to you and say, hey, I need help painting my living room, I'm going to go to Amorta here, and I'm going to say, Amorta, I'd like you to come help me paint my living room. And if you do it, I will give you $200 if you just come help me paint my living room for an afternoon. All right, yeah, Amorta's going, yeah, I like that. All right. Now, conversely, what if I came to Amorta and I said, Amorta, I'm painting my living room. I need you to come help me do it. And if you don't come help me do it, I'm going to deduct $200 out of your bank account. Okay, now, other than me being a complete jerk, and I'm being nice with my language, okay, by doing it that way, which one of those you think would cause her to actually come and probably paint? If she knew she would lose $200 she already had, or if she would gain $200 that she doesn't already have? And if you're thinking it would be the former, that she would want to avoid losing the $200 she already has, you're absolutely right. Okay. Now, of course, she would probably deny doing it because, hey, I'm not going to go work for this jerk that's forcing me to do this. They're going to take money. But putting all of that aside, we want to avoid loss, avoid pain. So what we have to do then is we have to associate more of the long-term or short-term pain that we will derive from not changing this habit or forming the new habit, so that it is more powerful and stronger than the pleasure we will get from immediately engaging in this negative habit or not forming this new positive habit. Does that make sense? Show me some emojis if that makes sense to all of you. All right, good. I'm seeing a good number of emojis. I'm seeing some people without emojis. And if it doesn't make sense, don't worry. I'm going to allow you to ask questions, follow-up questions, comments, or even disagree with me if you like. That is great. I don't mind disagreement. In just a little bit, I'll give you a chance to raise your hand if you have a comment or question. Be as detailed about your new habit as possible. That's the next thing, is as you're thinking about the pluses and minuses of the habits that you have formed, you need to be as detailed as you possibly can when you're writing these things down. Don't just write down, I'll be healthier in 10 years. Okay, if I quit this bad habit of eating the way I've been eating, for example. Write down the details of what that's going to feel like. What is that going to mean? Well, in 10 years, I'll be able to do more physical things than I would otherwise. In fact, I might be healthier in 10 years than I am right now. I'll be more vibrant. My skin will probably be healthier and will look better. I'll live longer. I'll have a lot more oxygen pumping through my body. Whatever it is, be as detailed as you possibly can. Also, be as detailed as you possibly can when you're writing down the negative things that will be happening by you not changing this habit or forming a new habit. Let's go in a different direction here rather than eating or smoking or a typical kind of addiction that we might have. Let's go with the new habit I want to form is that I want to learn more about human psychology every day. I just want to learn a little bit more about how the human mind works every single day, just a little bit. It might be just 5 minutes. It might be one little thing I read, whatever it is. Okay. Now, what are the positives going to be of that in the long term? I could write down, in 5 years, I'll be smarter. I'll know more about human psychology. But if I really think about it, how is that going to affect my life going forward? The relationships I have in my life. The more I understand how the human mind works, the better I'm going to be interacting with other people, the more I'm going to understand my own brain. In 1 year, if I study a little bit more every day about human psychology, I will have 365 days of more knowledge about how my own mind works. And that's frankly how I got to the point where I am right now, of being here in front of you wonderful people talking about these things that I've learned over the years, is this deeper understanding. So write down those things, and that will help you to want to form and maintain this new habit. All right, key point number 2, the 21 days to a new habit principle. How many of you with a show of emojis have heard that it takes 21 days to form a new habit? Have any of you heard that before? Okay. All right, couple of you. There we go. This may be new news to some of you. Now, I've heard different numbers. Yes, I've heard as little as 7 days. I don't happen to agree with that. I think 7 days is too short. I've heard as much as 30 to 60 days. All right. But the general kind of middle ground is that it takes 21 days to form a new habit. What that means is that you have to be consistent throughout your day, throughout your life, throughout your week, to make sure that you are doing this new habit or changing this old habit on a consistent basis consistently. It takes time, but not as much time as you would think. I mean, some people think, oh my gosh, it'll take years for me to form this new habit. Not really. If you put 21 days of good focused energy into changing that habit, with consistency being the key, you can change just about any habit that you have. And remember to stay focused on the good that will come from achieving this goal. One of the best ways you can do this is to open up that document that you created for yourself, right? Of the reasons why this goal is positive for you to change or to start. Read that aloud every day as you're doing the 21 days to form that new habit. All right. Now, the challenge here is that you are the only authority that you have here. And we're going to get more into this in a little bit. You are the biggest cheerleader you have. You have to have the willpower and the desire to truly change that habit. And that's why key point number 1 is so important first, is you've got to know why you want to change that habit. Okay. If you don't know the why, then you're never going to get to changing the habit. Because when it comes to doing this for 21 days in a row, changing a habit that maybe has been ingrained in you for years, if not decades, you're going to fall off that wagon, and you're going to have a day or two where you don't change that habit or form that new habit. And all of a sudden your 21-day cycle is broken. All right. Now, before we move on to key points number 3, 4, and 5, I want to take just a moment and see if anyone has any questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clear the raised hands right now. If you have a question or a comment or a disagreement, if you're like, hey, Todd, you know what you said about key point number 1, I disagree with that because of this. That is great. I don't mind disagreements. As long as we're just, being courteous to each other in the conversation, I have no problem with somebody disagreeing with me. I don't know everything. Oh, far from it. I'm learning new things each and every day. So if you have a comment or question, go ahead and hit your raised hand button down in the lower right of your screen. That will let me know that you've got a comment or a question. There are no stupid questions. There are no stupid comments. Again, as long as we're being courteous to each other, ourselves, and the people around us, then ask any question. All right, I don't see any hands going up yet. That either means that you're multitasking and doing other things while you're watching, which no, I don't think that's it. Or maybe I'm just being so detailed that, Zaraki's got a comment. There we go. Now we got the comments or questions coming in. Zaraki, I see yours, then Jeff. So Zaraki, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone, and we should be able to hear you now, Zaraki.
Hey, hi.
Hello.
So the other point you made about pain being a greater motivator than pleasure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I happen to think it was the other way around. I mean, when you gave us the options, I did say that I think pleasure is like a better motivator.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just, I don't fully agree on that point, because I think that pain may be a great motivator, but like for me personally, I think that pleasure is going to be like, so here's this habit that you want to create. And the other stuff you said made sense, the macro and the micro factors and all that. So I'd rather be, focusing more on the good things, the pleasure that comes out of. Recently, I quit smoking. It's been 11 days since I quit smoking.
Yeah, congratulations! Yeah. Fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if I wanted to focus on the negative points, I mean, the pain. Of course, it's obvious. I was winded. I couldn't breathe when I'm climbing upstairs or whatever.
Sure.
But yeah, but I think the positives that I focused on, the pleasure was. So I ride motorcycles. I like to play sports with my friends and all. So I kind of focused on the pleasures there. I'd be more, athletic at whatever I do. So that was the whole point that I was going for there.
That's a great point, Zaraki, and I appreciate that comment. That is a great comment. And so my comment back to that is, each one of you is going to be different. Each one of you is going to respond a little bit differently. For some of you, thinking about the pain you're avoiding might be stronger than the pleasure you'll be gaining. What I love, though, Zaraki, is that what you were doing was you were focusing on the pleasure that you're going to gain from not being a smoker anymore, which I think is absolutely the right way to go, 100%. Conversely, another way that does a similar thing is focusing on the pain of not being able to do those things. So that is a converse of the same thing. It's very similar. But what I like about what Zaraki was doing, which we don't tend to do quite as much in our day-to-day lives as I think we should, is focusing on the positivity rather than the negativity. Being a little bit of an optimist more than a pessimist. Rather than focusing on, oh my gosh, if I don't quit smoking, I'm not going to be able to ride my motorcycle as much or do these sports things that I like doing with my friends or having the vitality to do the things I love, versus him focusing on, I'm going to picture myself out on there playing softball with my buddies and riding my motorcycle with the wind blowing through my hair, and all that stuff. That is absolutely great. The main reason that I wanted to bring up the pain versus pleasure principle and how strong pain can be as a motivator is because oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes in the moment when we're trying to change a bad habit or form a new habit, we're thinking about the pleasure we're going to gain from that bad habit in that moment. That's the main reason I wanted to bring it up, using the smoking as an example. Oftentimes, we're focusing on the pleasure I'm going to get from not only smoking that cigarette, but holding that cigarette in my hand and lighting it up, going through the ritual of that cigarette, right? Or going through that ritual of taking out that bag of chips that I love and hearing it open and as that air seal is broken and have been tearing into those chips, right? So in a moment, sometimes it can be better to focus on either the long time pain that I will gain from taking this pleasurable action right now, or do what Zaraki was doing, which was instead of the pleasure, the short-term pleasure I'm going to get from this momentary cigarette, I'm going to focus on the long-term, much greater pleasure I'm going to gain from not smoking this cigarette. Absolutely a great comment, Zaraki. Jeff, did you have a comment or a question? I have unmuted you.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
This is great. I'm loving the camaraderie, the sharing, and the opportunity to speak, so thank you for that.
You bet. Thank you.
So you're saying it takes time, but not as much time as you may think, and that consistency is key.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm thinking back to what you had mentioned. As Zaraki said, I also raised my hand with more positive affirmations or things for me that I see positively. That's why I'm going to drive myself to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll write them down, as you had mentioned. But for me, in that moment, when I either want the cigarette or I want that French fry, or it's no big deal today that I'm just going to go down and pick up a burger from McDonald's or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those things that I'm written down, they don't mean anything to me at that moment.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, how does that? Maybe they're in points 3, 4, 5, but how do I think in terms of the macro time when in that micro moment I want that thing.
I love that. Oh, Jeff, that's fantastic. Both of you, Jeff and Zaraki, fantastic questions and comments. All right. You brought up a great point that I did not put in my slides for today, that we're going to divert from those for just a moment because this is such an important thing. How in a moment do I remember the macro when the micro is all I'm really focused on? I'm going to give you a couple of real-world examples. Now, I could sit here and just say, well, before you go get those French fries, before you light up that cigarette, you got to stop and think for a moment. And that's going to come up in a moment. There's the stop, think, act principle. We're going to get to that in a moment. But I'm going to give you something even better. We have the ability to communicate with ourselves consistently. And one of the best things you can do, I'm going to use your driving to McDonald's to get the hamburger thing, okay? You know what? I love a good Big Mac once in a while. Hey, you know what? I'm not ashamed to admit that. I love a Big Mac once in a while. There's nothing nutritionally good about that. I get it. But occasionally I just love to go get a Big Mac. I know it's not doing anything good for my body. It's only doing bad things. So one of the things you can do in that example is if you know that's one of the challenges you have, well, guess what? You don't have a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Wendy's in your living room. You have to go out to get that. So what you could do is get yourself a little yellow sticky note and write on that sticky note, what bad things is this burger going to do to my body? And stick it on the dashboard of your car. Stick it on the steering wheel of your car, all right? And as soon as you go out to that car and you get in there and you sit down, you're going to see that note. Now, is that note going to make you stop driving? Not necessarily, but it's giving you that moment of pause. It's having you focus either on the negative of what will happen if you go have this burger, or if you prefer, what are the positive things I will be giving up by driving to McDonald's right now and getting this burger? And doing the same thing tomorrow and the same thing next week and the same thing in a month, right? Okay? So that's one of my favorite things to do. Now, this is easier to do when you live by yourself to a degree because I live by myself. So if I want to put sticky notes on anything in my house, I can do that. If I want to put a sticky note on my door to my garage that says, am I driving somewhere to do something positive in the long run and enforce a good habit, or am I driving someplace to enforce a bad habit? I can put that on my door. There's nobody else I'm living with that might have a problem with it. However, what those of you who live with other people have going for you that I do not is that hopefully these people care about you. Hopefully these people love you and want what's best for you. So if you go to them and you say, hey, I'm going to do some weird things, seemingly weird things for the next month or so, and I would love your support and encouragement to do this. Is it okay? I'm going to put a sticky note on the door that says this. That is purely for me. You can ignore it. You don't have to do it. I just ask that you don't take it down. And is it okay? And here's why I'm doing that. And most of the time, if they care about what's truly best for you and they love you, they're going to be like, absolutely do that. I'll support you. And I'll even ask you when you're going somewhere if you want, are you going to McDonald's to get that burger, that Big Mac? Right? So that's one of the best things you can do. Don't be afraid to leave yourself reminders of why this stuff is important in the macro time frame, not just the I want the taste of that Big Mac right now. We've all heard that phrase, right? A moment on the lips, a lifetime on the hips, right? Well, I'm using the food analogy here because I think it's just something everyone to a degree can relate to, okay? But this applies to anything. Exercise. Let's use exercise as a thing. I think we can all agree that some form of physical aerobic exercise is really good for the body. Okay, there's no science that I have seen that says that cardiovascular exercise is bad for you unless you're overdoing it or unless you have a heart condition and you've been told by a doctor don't do anything strenuous at all. It is good for the body. All right, but we sometimes need that motivation to do it. Well, then what I will do is before I go to bed at night, I make sure that I have a yellow sticky note on the door to my bedroom that says, get your cardiovascular workout in this morning before you do anything else and get distracted. Because in a year, 2 years, and 5 years, you're going to feel so much better than you do right now. All right, so I see that first thing in the morning when I get up, and it reminds me. And if I choose to ignore it, I have to stop. You have to pause for just a second in your mind and go, why am I ignoring that yellow sticky note right now? And that's something that we wouldn't do if we just got up, didn't have that reminder, and we just start going about our day. We get busy, and before you know it, the whole day's gone, and I didn't exercise, but I've got excuses. So those little reminders will be good. Is that kind of helpful, Jeff? If so, show some emojis. If that's helpful to everyone else, show me some emojis there. And if anyone has a follow-up on that, excellent. Please go ahead and raise your hand if you have a follow-up on that, okay? Follow-up question. Karuya, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You raised your hand. Did you have a comment or a question? If not, no worries. It might have just been a hand raised to acknowledge something else that was happening in the room. Okay, Karuya, it looks like does not have a comment or question. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. If you do, in a little bit, go ahead and raise your hand. All right, I'm going to continue on now then with the other key points. I see that I don't have any other raised hands at the moment. I will open it up to more comments and questions in a little bit. But let's get to key point number 3. Accountability, internal and external. Jeff, your comment spearheaded us moving into this. It's a perfect segue. The accountability factor, both internal and external. Believe in yourself and your ability to form new habits. Everyone and anyone can do this. One of the first things that we have to do to overcome our challenge in changing habits or forming new ones is we have to get over the thought that, well, I'm just a habitual person. I just have an addictive tendency. I can't change habits. And that's, I'm sorry, excuse my French, but that's bullshit. Okay, that's BS. It is BS. Now, some people, yes, absolutely, I'm acknowledging that. Some people have more of a challenge in this area than others. Some people do have a more addictive personality and addictive tendencies than others. Absolutely. But there are people out there who have had horrible addictive tendencies that are making negative impacts on their lives that have changed those tendencies and made that change permanent. And if anyone else can do it, you can do it as well. You just have to form these new habits and make sure that you realize how important it is to you. We've all heard that phrase, right? That no real change happens until the person wants to make that change for themselves. If you're making the change for others, that change oftentimes doesn't happen, right? But you've got to want it for yourself, and sometimes we have to hit that horrible thing called rock bottom before we make a change, right? Things have to get so quote-unquote bad that I have no choice but to change this. Now, sometimes that change is forced by external forces. It's a spouse saying, honey, I love you, but if this doesn't change, you're going to lose me. Or a child saying, Dad, you're a bad influence on me. You're making a bad example for me. Or your spouse saying, you're making a bad example for our children. Whatever it is, this hitting rock bottom sense. But guess what? Even if your spouse comes to you and says, if you don't change this, I'm out of here, you may still not change that habit. Because you've got to come up with the reasons in yourself, part of which will hopefully be not losing this person in your life that is so important to you and realizing that you're causing them harm as well. But also, what are the other multiple reasons in the macro and the micro for you to make these changes now? All right, but you have the ability to do this. Willpower. Willpower is such a negative word for so many people. But you know what? I like to look at I want to take a page out of Zaraki's book, out of Jeff's book, and I want to look at the positive side of willpower a moment. There's something really powerful in there, and that's the first 4 letters of that word, will. We have agency. We have the ability and the will to make changes in our lives. Some of us to differing degrees than others, depending on where you live in the world, what your government is like, what the situation around you is like. You may have less opportunities than others and so forth, of course. But we all have the ability to change one thing. Everyone does. And that is how we respond to what's happening in our lives. That is the one thing we all have control over. No one else can control it if we don't let them. How we respond to what's happening around us and what's happening inside of us is the one thing we have control over. And that's why I love the word willpower, because it means I have the will to change. I have the ability and the agency to make change in my life. Share your desire to change with others, but only those you trust to help you with the accountability and the encouragement. This is a really big one. Yep, I see some emojis going up from Jeff, okay? This is important. You have to be cautious of who you share these changes in your life with. Is this person that I'm going to share this change? Hey, I want to make this change. I'm going to change this habit. I'm going to form this new habit. And I would love your help on an accountability and encouragement factor. Is that person going to be a helpful person or what I like to call a dangerous person? A dangerous person is not the stranger that you don't know, that yells an obscenity to you when you accidentally cut them off on the road. That's not a dangerous person. That's just somebody who's possibly having a bad day and took it off on somebody in the wrong way. All right? I mean, that's the nice version of that, right? A dangerous person is somebody we know. A dangerous person is a loved one, a friend, a spouse, a confidant who truly cares about you. However, they feel that whatever change you're trying to make is impossible for you to do, or that it's going to be a negative change for you. They're being a negative person, but they're doing it because they think they should for what's best for you. So we have to be cautious. Who am I going to go to? Am I going to go to somebody who's going to say, hey, I love that you're, Zaraki, I love that you are quitting smoking. I'm so glad that you're making that choice to what's going to be so much better for you in so many ways for your life going forward. Or is it going to be somebody who's going to say, well, Zaraki, I mean, come on, I'm a smoker. You know, we love smoking together. Are you saying you're not going to come smoke with me when I want to go have a smoke? Okay, that person may not be the person to go for accountability and for encouragement. All right, so ask yourself, is this person going to be a positive force? Are they going to be helpful? Or are they, even out of thinking about good things for you, are they going to be giving you the wrong kind of motivation going forward? All right, key point number 4 goes back to what Jeff was talking about too, the stop, think, act principle. All right. We already talked about using yellow sticky notes, putting notes to yourself. How many of you have ever seen, I always, whenever I think about this, I think about the movie Memento. How many of you have ever seen the movie Memento? Show me some emojis. It's an older movie, came out in like the, I don't know, early 90s, late 90s, I don't know. Okay, I think I saw Babby Zoe go up there. All right, the movie Memento is a fantastic movie. It's made by Christopher Nolan, who's probably most famous for making the Batman Begins, Dark Knight, the Christian Bale Batman movies. Really great filmmaker. Well, early in his career, he made a movie called Memento, which is a story that's told in reverse. It's a person who has lost their memory. They have no short-term memory. And he wakes up every day not knowing fully who he is, what has happened in his life, what even happened yesterday. So what he does is before he goes to bed at night, he writes notes on his arm. He'll write notes to himself on his arm to remind him of things tomorrow morning. And it just so happens in the story he's trying to solve a murder. He's trying to solve a crime. Okay? But he can't remember anything from day to day. And I always think of that when I write these yellow sticky notes and put them up on my door. Because right now, I might be feeling like, hey, I've got this habit. I've got it. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to put a sticky note up. But then I have to think to myself, but if I wake up tomorrow and I forget how important this is to me right now, I better have that note on my arm, or in this case, that yellow sticky note on the door. All right? We tend to rush in our moment-to-moment lives. And this leads to a reinforcement of bad habits. If you're at all like I am, you wake up in the morning and you got a bunch of things to do today. If you've got kids, got to get the kids up, got to help get them off to school, and then I got to get to my job, and I got to go do my job, and then when I get back home, I got to make some food, and got to have some dinner, got to spend some time with the spouse, all this stuff, and it's all wonderful stuff, or a lot of it is wonderful things, but it takes a lot of time. And to have a moment to think during the day can be really challenging. So we have to be aware of that moment-to-moment hectic basis that we have on a day-to-day basis to make sure that these new habits that we're forming aren't falling through the cracks. So before you act, stop and think about the choice you are about to make and the ramifications of that action. The yellow sticky notes on the door are a great way to remind you to do this. But this can apply every moment of every day. It doesn't take long. I'm not talking about, okay, well, I got to stop everything I'm doing for 30 minutes and I got to ponder. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking in a moment. This morning, okay, before this program started, you had a choice of whether to come in here today. You had a choice of whether to do this or not. And in a moment, you made a choice to be here. You made a choice to say, hey, if I get one little nugget of good knowledge from this Todd character that improves my life, it might be worth my being in there for an hour. Now, you could have very easily in that moment made another choice and said, but I also could go on YouTube and watch this YouTube video, or instead I could go for a jog outside, which incidentally I would recommend doing as soon as we're done here. Jogging is good. It's healthy. But you made the choice to be here. And it probably didn't take you long to make that choice. If you even considered the other option at all, you probably went, all right, well, geez, it's 10 o'clock. Am I going to pop in here or not? Yeah, why not? Boom. That's as long as it took. But you ponder it for a moment. Give yourself a moment to think before you act. Focus on the long term and not just the immediate gratification. Okay, so that's sort of a form of the micro versus the macro. Think about the long-term ramifications. Think about the long-term ramifications of not being here today. Boy, if I hadn't been here today, this one little thing that Todd said that I'm going, now that's an aha moment for me, I wouldn't have gotten. And I hope that each of you are getting at least one little aha moment out of today that will make you think a little differently the next time you're looking at changing or forming a habit. All right, key point number 5, and then we're going to open it up to any questions or comments. Make the commitment every day. This is the hardest part. Okay, I saved this for last because this is the most challenging part. It's also the most rewarding part, is that true change only comes through consistent and congruent action. That's where true change comes from. You do it for 21 days to form that new habit, but then at the end of that 21 days, you don't go back to the old habit. You got to keep that habit going. You got to keep it going every day. Every moment you are getting results. I love it when people say, well, Todd, I just can't seem to do anything right. Whenever I do something, I don't get results. And I'm like, well, don't you? In reality, everything we do every moment is getting results. They just might not be the results you want. Everything we do is getting results. Just make sure that you're making the choices that are more likely to give you the results you want. Every moment you have the power to change your state. What I mean by that is not moving from Michigan to Ohio. I mean, you can change your state of mind every moment of every day. If you're sitting here right now and you're thinking in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I don't know, I think all this stuff is just it's kind of ethereal mumbo jumbo. I don't know that this really will work. I don't know. All right, you have the choice in that moment to change your state and go, you know what? I don't know that this won't work. I don't know that it will. I don't know for sure. I'm going to choose to believe that it might. And I'm going to take an action toward making this happen. I'm going to take a step and I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to take another step and see what happens. You can change your state in any moment. Stop ever saying to yourself words like, I couldn't do this. This might work for Todd. This might work for Zaraki. This might work for Jeff. This might work for Baby Vet, but it won't work for me. Stop saying that and say, you know what? If it can work for them, it can probably work for me too, right? All right, that's so important. And then commit to 7 days. All right, I'm going to give you all a challenge here. When you leave here, before you do anything else, okay, so here's the test. How serious are you about making change in your life? Here it is. Here's your opportunity. When you leave this event, before you do anything else, take a minute, 2 minutes. That's all it should take. And write down a habit you want to change or a habit you want to form. Something. It can be tiny. It can be small. It doesn't have to be massive. And then commit yourself to working on that habit for 7 days. Just 7 days. Mark it on your calendar if you have to. At the end of that 7 days, did I stick to this for 7 days? And then add to that calendar on that 7th day that I'm going to do this for another 7 days. Okay? Then just do it for 14 days. And before you know it, you'll have hit 21 days, and that habit has now started to really root itself in you and make change. Now you just keep it going. And you keep reminding yourself of the positive change that's come from it and the pain that you're avoiding by changing this habit. Okay, I hope that all makes sense. All right, so with that, with the 7 or so minutes we have left, first of all, was this helpful to you? Show me some emojis if you felt you might have gotten an aha moment out of this, something that you'll take away from this and go, okay, that might change things a little bit for me, even on a small scale. Love it. All right, excellent. Now, if you have a question or a comment, or a disagreement with anything that I've said. Like I said, I don't mind having a good discussion about something. Well, look at the conversation we had because Zaraki said I like to focus on the pleasure instead of the pain. That was great. Great conversation. Hit your raised hand button. That will let me know you want me to unmute your microphone, and I'll go ahead and let you ask your comment or question. Just remember, there's no stupid questions or comments as long as we're courteous to each other. Babizo, you raised your hand. You might have raised your hand just in response to one of my questions, but I'm going to unmute you in case you had a comment or a question. Nope, no question. Okay, gotcha. All right, I'm going to go ahead and... got that. All right, Mr. Krabs. All right, Mr. Krabs. Did you have a comment or question?
Yes, I was wondering, talk about habits a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And did you look into the role of the subconscious mind and the conscious mind? Because like a lot of habits are being run by the subconscious mind. I think it's 95%.
Mm-hmm.
So if I put on my left shoe every day, it becomes a habit, right?
Sure.
And when you talk about willpower, for me, it's like this small piece of consciousness you have,
mm-hmm.
like this little hole, to try to change your habit that's being run for 95% of your subconscious mind. Because if it's smoking, drinking, whatever it is, it just becomes an automatic
mm-hmm.
process, like an automatic thing. Because the subconscious mind is just like driving a car, right? When you first try to learn to drive a car, has to become a habit, and then it becomes automatic, and then you can even talk to the guy next to you and still drive the car. So the subconscious minds take over but that's at the same reason I think it's really hard, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, is to change certain kind of habits because it's just so like grained in the system. Like
absolutely. Mr. Krabs. Phenomenal question. Okay, I'm so glad you asked that because I can't believe I didn't talk about that at all here, and we really should. You're absolutely right. Most of the stuff that's happening in our lives, our subconscious is driving an awful lot of it on a moment-to-moment basis. I mean, right now we're all breathing, our hearts are beating, all of that stuff. We're doing that without having to think about it. That's not just our subconscious. That's actually a part of our brain that is focused purely on doing the things that we don't have to think about on a moment-to-moment basis. But the subconscious is super powerful. However, by doing the things we talked about today, you can change the subconscious. Our subconscious is driven very much by our conscious mind as well. What forms the stuff that's in our subconscious? Now, some of it is certainly genetics. Some of it is certainly evolution. Some of it is certainly, just what's kind of in our brain when we're born. But an awful lot of what's in our subconscious is formed by our experiences, our contexts, and what we think about on a regular basis. So if you want to change what's in your subconscious and have your subconscious working on changing these habits with you as well, the best thing you can do is have consistent and congruent change to what you're thinking about every moment of every day. That will start to change the subconscious. Now, will it do it instantaneously? Absolutely not. The subconscious takes time. That's part of why the 21 days to form a new habit is there. Now, 21 days, because it's going to take that long for it to really seep into the subconscious to where your subconscious goes, okay, apparently this is what we do now. This is the new pattern. And it starts to ingrain itself. And the subconscious informs the conscious, but the conscious also informs the subconscious. We just have to do it in a congruent fashion. All right. So that's part of why, because we don't have control over our subconscious in that we can't go in and immediately rewrite our subconscious. If it were as simple as obviously going in like a line of code on a computer and saying, subconscious, you're changed to this, boom, and hit enter, it'd be like we're in the Matrix and we're Neo, right? We're Keanu Reeves. We can jack in. That's not how it works, unfortunately. And Mr. Krabs is absolutely right. It takes time. But it takes time and influence from our conscious mind to change those neural pathways of what's defining our subconscious mind. I hope that helps, Mr. Krabs. And if you have a follow-up or anything, feel free to raise your hand. Oh, I see you raised your hand already. I'm going to get back. Actually, I'm going to unmute you, Mr. Krabs, right now in case you have a follow-up to that real quick. Go ahead, Mr. Krabs.
Yeah, I wanted to give like a little tip. Something I heard a long time ago is was this guy who was trying to stop smoking. It's a habit, right? And he came to Osho. It doesn't matter who he is, but he's someone who gave a lot of teachings on meditation. So he said to him, well, make your smoking, make it a meditation. So do the smoking consciously. And so when you smoke, consciously you put on the cigarette in your mouth and you make a meditation out of it. You're actually conscious of your action, and then you can actually stop the action. Then you can actually choose to not smoke because you're conscious of it. So it's not the automatic thing it's doing it. It's because of the conscious act of doing it, and then you can choose to stop it. And I think mindfulness or meditation, whatever, is a really good way to help with habits, I think. So that's just something I would show.
Great point, Mr. Krabs. And so I would take that even one step further. I agree wholeheartedly with what you've just said. And I would take it one step further in the smoking example and get it to a point where you're slowly, through that meditation, starting to change the need to even put the hand up and mimic the smoking in your mind or make that the meditation, to where you're thinking about the same things that you would think about. You slowly lose the physical aspect of it, because I think that could, in some negative ways, pull somebody back into smoking. Oh, I'm just going to smoke one now because I'm used to doing this as part of my meditation. But I think if you start with that makes absolute sense. You're now doing a lot of the things that you've associated with that bad habit that you liked, whatever the pleasure was you were getting from that, and you're channeling that into a more positive way of getting that similar feeling. And then eventually you just remove the physical aspect of that as well, and now that's gone. Wonderful. All right, Amorta, I've got 3 more comments, or actually 2 more comments up here. Anyone that has to go, because I know we're at 11 o'clock, I'm going to pause here for just a moment. I'm going to stick around and continue answering questions for anyone that wants to and can stick around. I encourage you to stick around if you can. If you can't, I want to thank you for being here so much. I get so much out of getting to do these programs with you. I learn new things every day. The comments that Mr. Krabs, Zaraki, Jeff, all of you have brought up today, those help me to continue to grow as well. I encourage you to join the Facebook group. I don't correspond on there a lot. You're not going to be deluged with a lot of stuff, but you'll hear about these programs as they're coming up. And next Monday, same time, we will be back here for a whole new subject. So if you want to, that event is already live on Facebook or on AltSpace. You can go to that now and click interested, and you'll be all set to go. I hope I will see all of you back next Monday for our next subject on how to take charge of your life. All right, so with that, Amorta, you had raised your hand. I want to unmute you, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
So I actually have 2 questions.
Okay, great. Love it.
Second one. So I know you mentioned, like, we can change our habits and stuff, and some of them are quite heavy, or I would say harder to do than others. Do you think that you could do multiple habits at once, or do you think it's better to just do like one at a time?
Ooh, that's a great one. Oh, I love that. Thank you, Amorta. All right. So should I, deal with one habit at a time or multiple habits? My recommendation is this. If they're small habits, if they're relatively, okay, this isn't going to be, I don't see this. Now, this is in our minds, okay? I don't see this as being too hard for me to change. I think you can work on multiple habits at once. In fact, I think there's a real positive thing that can come from that. Because as you're working on this habit and being conscious of working on this habit, you're being reminded that, hey, I can do this for this other habit too. And it just that snowball effect of success starts to happen as you're feeding these different habits with that positive thinking. However, if it's a big habit, if it's something that you are dreading changing, or you're worried you're not going to be able to change, or something that's been rooted in your subconscious for a long time, and you're not used to changing habits in this way, I would focus on that one habit, at least for that first 7 to 14 days, maybe even the 21 days. Okay, that's how I would go about that. Jeff, you had a question or comment, and if you have a follow-up to that, Amorta, please feel free to raise your hand, and I'll unmute you again. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank you for providing this space, this opportunity for us to all meet here and share about these topics. It's wonderful. I came here last week and I had to come back. So
Great. Well, it's good to have you back, and thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I got a lot from this smoking cigarette conversation because it's actually what I'm dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, perfect. Thank you for that.
Yes.
And just taking that off.
Yeah,
and,
thank you, Zaraki and Mr. Krabs for that, for your input on that too.
Right?
It's great stuff. Yeah.
So good. But just one thing I want to thank you for is I was struggling with the idea of writing it down in terms of whether I write it down in a book or digital form and then end up changing it. These types of things, how it goes for me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else has that same thing. But your suggestion on the sticky note, it's not like I haven't heard it before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware that like this is something that can be done. But in tonight's session, what I got was that it's something that, yes, I know, but I could take action on as something that could shift the change that I'm looking for that I haven't been taking the action on, and that's why it hasn't shifted.
Yes.
So I thank you for that note because that's what I'm willing to take on from this conversation today.
Oh, that's great, Jeff. And that sparked one more thing that I want to mention to you, and that is we are in here in virtual reality. At least most of you are. Some of you, a couple of you might be on a flat screen. But those of you who are in virtual reality are going to totally understand what I'm about to say. What the sticky note principle does is it brings a tangibility to our habit that we're trying to change. And it brings that tangibility into the real world. We are real world creatures. We are creatures that are existing in space, that are existing in an environment, that are existing in this wonderful thing that we call our planet, our universe, everything, all right? And in virtual reality, one of the reasons we love coming into virtual reality is that feeling of presence, that feeling of being in an actual environment. I feel like I'm in a room with all of you. It's crazy. It's so hard to describe to people who've never done it. I feel like we're in the same room together. All right. That tangibility, that human desire to connect with an environment, to be part of a space, to be an object in space, if you will, is part of why putting those yellow sticky notes in your environment can be so powerful. Because then it takes them out of looking at them on a piece of paper or looking at them on a cell phone where they exist in this either two-dimensional space on a piece of paper or in a digital space on your smartphone, and puts it in the real world. And it feels more real. Not only is it reminding us when we see it, but it now feels like it's part of the environment I'm in, not just a reminder to do something. So that's one of the other reasons that I love the sticky note principle. And I see some emojis coming up that's resonating with a few of you as well. Yes, and I see a thumbs up from Jeff there. All right. If there are any other... Oh, Zaraki's got a comment or question. Zaraki, go ahead. I've unmuted you.
Yeah. No, this is just like sort of a follow-up. I think I'm actually going to go through with this, and there are a couple of habits that I want to like reinforce.
Yes.
I'm going to give the sticky notes approach a shot. That's all that I want to say.
I love it. Excellent. I appreciate that, Zaraki, and do it. Yeah, absolutely do it. And for those of you who are either already members of the Facebook group or are going to join the Facebook group today, if you just go to the Facebook groups and you just kind of search on Take Charge Alt Space, you should find us right near the top there. Feel free to start a conversation in there as well, and let me know how it goes, Zaraki. I would love to hear from you in between these sessions, and let me know, hey, I'm having a challenge today, or, oh, yeah, putting the sticky note really helped, or whatever it is, okay? Oh, my gosh, I see a few more hands that have gone up. All right, I'm going to stick around a little longer. If anyone has to leave, you just drop out. I won't take it personally, but if you want to stick around to hear some more answers here, I'm going to keep this going. Amorda, I saw your hand go up again.
A question about the Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we miss like next week, do you guys record them and upload them to the group at all?
That is a great question. As of now, I'm not recording these. Okay. And the reason for that, I go back and forth on this. There's two reasons I don't do that. One, is I think we would all agree, show me some emojis if you agree with this, that when we're here, quote unquote, in person in this space, we're probably more engaged and paying closer attention to what's happening, right? So show me some emojis if you agree with that. Whereas if I record this, you can't watch it in VR. You have to watch the flat screen version of it, and it's easy to multitask and do other things. So that's the main reason I've not been recording this. The other reason is it's just not a really, really compelling way to record these, not visually. I've tossed around the idea of recording the audio only of them and making those available on the Facebook. So if you're on the Facebook group, comment on there. Let me know if you feel having a recording of these would be beneficial. And maybe I'll start recording them as we go forward, at least audio. Cool. All right. Let's see. Babazo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You had a comment or a question? All right. You should be able to unmute yourself there on your end. I think I'm showing. Let me fix it here. Let's try. All right. How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
I most definitely will be in this virtual reality class next week.
Fantastic.
And,
Great.
I'm following the Facebook group as we speak.
Love it. Proactive.
What I have to say.
Taking action. Fantastic. Thank you for that comment. I appreciate it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in here next week as well and seeing you on the Facebook group as well. Baby Vet, did you have a comment or a question? Go for it. You should be unmuted now. Nope. Okay, let me try mute and unmute again. Okay, how about now? Oh, no. Baby Vet, no! We can't hear you. I'm not sure what's going on. I've got you unmuted on my end. It looks like it's not wanting to unmute you on your end. I'm sorry. You know what? If you can't talk now, feel free. I know. I know, right? Feel free to join the Facebook group. Type your comment in there, and I'll be checking that periodically, and I'll respond to your question or comment in there. And with that, everyone, I want to thank you again. I think that's all the comments and questions we had come in. Look how many people stuck around to hear the questions and comments. That's a real sign that we're a community here, and you have as much. I got to tell you, today especially, this is going to go on in the records as one of the events where I got as much from you as I hope you got from me. The comments from everyone, great things to think about.